You may believe that the opposite of love is hate. I do not see these two emotions as opposites. In fact, love and hate are often closely aligned. To me, the opposite of love is fear. When you have fear, you do not have love. Ego uses fear as a way to keep authentic love out of your life. When love is not present in your life, you have succumbed to ego and allowed fear in where love could be. You have allowed ego to replace God. Learning to experience authentic love means abandoning ego's insistence that you have much to fear and that you are in an unfriendly world. This begins with an assessment of your reluctance to embrace love. If you are not experiencing love in your life right now, it is because you are, in some way, afraid. You need to examine your fears with honesty and with love. When you do, you will transform your fears into love. You will open up a space within you that can only be occupied by love. In this space you are on purpose, walking the way of the sacred self. But first, you must see how you substitute fear for love. Your ego steadfastly promotes fear because it fears authentic love itself. This false self helps you convince yourself that you are in some way incomplete. That is the source of all fear. Afraid of having your emptiness, your incompleteness exposed, you expend a lot of energy creating a false image of happiness. The fear about exposing the emptiness keeps you seeking relationships that ego tells you will satisfy the longing within you. What happens is that you enter a relationship starved for the love that is your higher self. Your inner hunger is masked, pretending to be something else. No wonder so many people repeatedly think they have found love and repeatedly declare they've lost it. How different it is when you can notice the inner emptiness and think, what's not to like? This longing is part of being human and knowing love. Then you will let ego know that fear is not your choice. Love is your choice. Just imagine how our system might be if people knew they were already complete. What would you need to purchase? What would you need to have to own? Who would you have to impress? Who would you need to have on your arm? The answers give you an idea of how much we rely on the fear that we are incomplete and unacceptable as we are, and how unaware we are of our divine connection. The fear that is a substitute for love is simply a fear of being unacceptable. Virtually all fears can be traced directly back to self-esteem. If you love yourself, you will be able to transform your fears with love rather than allow them to direct your life. If you have an inner feeling of being complete and whole, knowing the loving presence that is there, then fear becomes a loving invitation to know more or to change something in your life. Fear will no longer threaten you as it did when you were unacquainted with your higher self. The inability to rely on the love that is our very essence shows up in many forms. Your ego wants you to believe that you are unacceptable and will gleefully assist you in creating an image to prove that it is so. Manifestations like obesity and personal slovenliness and eating disorders often are the fear-based projection of yourself. Ego can influence you to shun all efforts to be loved by others by refusing to allow the risk of an intimate encounter or the development of an intimate relationship. Ego often makes you selfishly pursue your own goals at others' expenses. You engage in perpetual conversation about yourself. We often use economic, social, and other types of excuses to defend behavior that does not extend love. For instance, you might excuse unloving or inconsiderate behavior because it's only my job, or because everyone else does it. Expressions of disgust or rudeness towards others are based on ego. They are heard in stores, on freeways, in offices, at airports, in restaurants, any place you are in your daily life. These are some of the common expressions of a fear-based ego struggling to keep you away from the experience of love that is your true essence. Before you begin to change these behaviors and thought patterns, you need to examine the payoffs. What is some part of your receiving as a payoff for listening intently to ego? Your ego works for its living. Its payoff is not money, but just in keeping alive. Your ego is not open to making contact with God because it would be immediately put out of business. Your ego is in direct conflict with your true purpose for being there. You are here to give and receive love. Your ego protects you from that vision by keeping you in a belief system that declares you are separate and special. By hanging on to the fears of your insufficiency, you can avoid taking any risks. As long as you have self-doubt and all of its attendant fears, you are guaranteed to stay in servitude to your false self. Your ego thrives on guilt. Your higher self knows that you should forgive yourself, learn from mistakes, and release feelings of fear and anxiety. But ego hands you guilt so that it will thrive. Guilt is the inner fear that you should pay a price for any and all mistakes you've committed in your life. Thus the ego convinces you that you must feel guilty, and it keeps you removed from your true spirit. Your ego doesn't reject love. The polite background ego voice whispers that love is a high ideal, but one that is loaded with danger. It warns you to not give too much love because you may be taken advantage of. Because you are so special, it tells you others want to take advantage of you. Ego promotes inauthentic love. In your relationships with others, your ego convinces you that your partner is just what you need to fill the emptiness within you. This is a great ruse that will forever keep you from knowing love and peace. Make a copy of this passage from Walt Whitman's Leaves of Grass. Tape it to your mirror and read it every morning. It will help stimulate the inner opening to the love you seek and dissolve fears if you are willing to do what the poet suggests. He says, "I exist as I am, that is enough. If no other in the world be aware, I sit content. And if each and all be aware, I sit content. One world is aware, and by far the largest to me, and that is myself. And whether I come to my own today or in 10,000 or 10 million years, I can cheerfully take it now, or with equal cheerfulness, I can wait." Remind yourself that God created you in perfect love, that is changeless and eternal. As you recognize and affirm this aloud each day, you will lose your fear of inadequacy and incompleteness. Constantly recalling the affirmation of being a creation of God beyond the world of the manifest will chase the fears away. Forgive yourself and welcome love back into your life. You see, when you get enough inner grace or inner peace or serenity, whatever you want to call it, and you feel really positive about yourself, it's almost impossible for you to be controlled and manipulated by anybody else. I'll give you an example. Just yesterday, I had to get on an airplane and fly to Chicago. Now, I got on the airplane at 1 o'clock in the afternoon in Fort Lauderdale. The plane took off and flew for 30 minutes, and they couldn't retract the landing gear. They were stuck in the down position, so they had to land the plane in Miami, go back and land it in Miami because they had longer runways. It wasn't an emergency, but I wasn't convinced that they had that foam out there on the runways because they were just seeing if their foam equipment worked. They were trying to convince us there was no emergency and that those ambulances weren't just standing by in case anybody fainted while they watched us land, that there was, in fact, some emergency. And I watched people around me on the plane when we were having to do this, and some people were panicked and fearful and scared. There was one couple that jumped and screamed, and there was a lot of interesting reactions, a lot of ashen looks, and a lot of very scared people. And I looked at myself, and I didn't have any of that. I didn't have any of that. It was okay. And I knew I was going to be okay, and I saw myself being okay. It wasn't that I tried very hard not to be fearful. It was that inside of me, there is something that has replaced that fear, and that is called grace or serenity, and it was okay. It was just simply all right, and I was fine. In fact, I was effective. I calmed down the guy next to me. I looked around to see where the emergency exits were, because I wanted to know how to get out of this place. I used my mind in a situation where other people might elect panic. I was electing to be conscious, to be intelligent, to save myself if necessary, and I wasn't the least bit afraid. And I know I would have been afraid at an earlier time in my life. That fear, that potential for fear, has been replaced by peace and fulfillment and knowing that when it's my turn, and that's okay too, and that I'm not afraid of any of that. So we landed, okay, and everything was fine. And there was a computer part that was missing that wouldn't give the right signal for the landing gear to go up, so they had to replace the part, and they canceled the flight. And 192 people were on this plane, and it was full. Right? There wasn't an empty seat. It was the last week after Easter break. There's no seats out of South Florida at all. Right? They announced, the first thing they did was announce that there would be nobody getting a seat out of South Florida because you just can't get one on all the airlines. They're all filled up. And you probably will have to be here a couple of days until we can do something about it. And they even announced that they weren't going to put us up in a hotel. There was like all of these negative things. And I watched the people around me. Now, a minute ago, they were worried about whether they were going to be alive. Now, suddenly, they're alive, and they're relieved about that. Now they're angry because the plane isn't going to take off or they're going to have a replacement. And so there's all this anger. Now, I believe in looking for solutions, never looking for problems. So when the plane landed, they said, no one can get off the airplane. But I knew they probably weren't talking to me. okay? Because as soon as it landed and the door opened, I went out and called my secretary and said, I have to give a speech tomorrow morning in Chicago, and there's a lot of people depending on me to be there. There's 500 people waiting to hear me speak, and we've set up this date in advance. I see myself in Chicago. I know I'll be there. 191 other people didn't believe they would be in Chicago and acted just that way. They were angry, they were upset, they were yelling at the people, they were letting their blood pressure get out of control, and they weren't doing anything. I said to my secretary, I will call you back in 15 minutes. She was in Fort Lauderdale. I'll call you back collect in 15 minutes. Just make sure I have a seat on a plane, no matter what it costs or what the inconvenience or what it get me a seat. At the moment that she called, somebody the moment before had canceled on another airline a first-class seat. They had just canceled, said they weren't going. And I was able to get that seat because the person that she called handled the cancellation, and she just replaced me on there, okay, instead of going through the whole list. And I had a seat on a flight that was 5 hours away, but I still had a seat on a flight to get in much later than I anticipated. And I went down and got my boarding pass, and I was, out of 192 people, there was only one that made it to Chicago. And I was that one, not because I'm smarter than everybody else, or because I know anything that other people don't know, or because I'm better than anyone else. It was because I look for solutions, not for problems, and I refuse to be victimized by my need to be right through using anger and being upset and so on. When you are able to visualize yourself doing something, you start acting on that visualization or that image. You're able to make things happen when you're looking for solutions that you can never make happen when you're more preoccupied with being a victim. I was in Redondo Beach, California, just the other day, and I was going to speak out there at a church in the evening to a large group. I had to rent a car, and I was driving through the town and looking for the Palos Verdes Hotel where I was assigned to stay, but I didn't know how to get there. And I had an idea of where it was, but I wasn't sure. And you've all been in that position, a tourist in a beach town looking for your place. You know, I had my turn signal on, and I had it on for a block or so, and then realized that it's 2 more blocks up. I took it off and waited. And there was somebody behind me who was having a myocardial infarction over my behavior. I am blasting on his horn and so on. And then I looked up into the mirror, and I could see him pounding on the dashboard of his car in anger. It's like, how dare you, I'll put you. And I wanted to stop the car, you know, and get out and say, everything's going to be fine. This is all going to work out just right. Just, you know, I'm going to be turning in another few blocks, and you can go on. Your life's going to be fine. And I ask you, the people here tonight in this room, what do you think caused that? What do you think created that kind of reaction in this person, where a stranger in a rented car that even says rented car on the back of it could go to that level of hatred and anger over a simple behavior of another human being, and a very normal behavior at that? What do you think caused that? You think it was me that caused that in him? You think it was my car, my behavior, my driving? It's none of that, see? That's really the only message that I have, is that who you are is the result of how you choose to process your life and the world and how it's presented to you. And until you understand that nobody out there in this planet, in this universe, has the power, the control to make you be or think or act or behave or emote in any way other than the way that you choose. And that capacity for thinking, that capacity for thought, it's the thing that most of us think is the least important part of our consciousness. We don't pay that much attention to it. We pay attention to this, the packaging, the body, and we evaluate our life based upon what rules apply to the body. And the rules, or the laws, or whatever you want to call them, that apply to your body, to your form, are very, very different than the rules and laws, principles that apply to the other part of you, the invisible part of you, if you will. And tonight's talk is really about that part of you. which is where you live. There's a man named Bucky Fuller. I don't know how many of you have heard of Buckminster Fuller. Brilliant man. He died a couple of years ago in his 90s, who worked with me on the Hunger Project and our efforts to end world hunger around the globe. He was a mathematician and a philosopher. He's the inventor of the geodesic dome. Brilliant man. He almost committed suicide when he was 30 years old. He went right down to the act of actually buying a gun. At that worst part of his life, made a decision that he could do something with this. He could turn it around and benefit from it. And he made major, major contributions. One of the things he said to me once, he said, Wayne, never forget that who you are, the human being that you are, that 99% of who you are is invisible, untouchable, unsmellable, impervious to the senses. That this form that you live in represents only 1% of your humanity. And 99% of your humanity is something other than form, whatever it is. And hopefully when we leave here tonight, you'll have not only a grasp of that, but perhaps some methods and ways of really living that, of really understanding that. The concept of form is a key word and a key notion, and I want you to think about it a lot. F-O-R-M, form, and all the rules that apply to it. And as I'll come back to it many, many times tonight. Until you can go beyond the boundaries of form, you can never awaken. You can never really live the life that you're capable of living and create the miracles that you're capable of creating until you absolutely, truly get a hold of that humanity behind your form, whatever that may be, whatever it is, however you define it. It's a great place that I'm speaking about. It's something very different than just being positive and just enjoying life and not being victimized by other people and thinking well of yourself and all of that. That's all fine and good, and those are almost elementary steps. It's much more of almost a spiritual message without the religion. It works like knowing that somehow you, who you are, this individual that has shown up here tonight, is someone who is much grander and much greater, much more divine, much more perfect, much more fantastic than just this form that you've showed up in. That what our life really is all about, it defies the world of form, it defies the world of linear. And yet we spend almost all of our energy and our time here, in this part of our consciousness, in form, believing that this is who we are. When you learn to go into your mind, when you learn that your mind is really a place that you can visit and exquisitely touch the face of God, you can remove the tension and stress and everything else that's troublesome in your life when you give yourself time to experience your true humanity. That concept of understanding that universal intelligence that is a part of our consciousness is not just something for mystics and people to go in loincloths and contemplate in caves. It's for us. It's for every one of us in the practice of our daily lives, in whatever business we're in.
There is no place that God is not. Remind yourself of this every day. It has been said that God sleeps in the minerals, rests in the vegetables, walks in the animals, and thinks in us. Think of God as a presence rather than a person. A presence that allows a seed to sprout, that moves the stars across the sky, and simultaneously moves a thought across your mind. A presence that grows the grass and grows your fingernails all at the same time. This presence is everywhere, therefore it must also be in you. And if it's everywhere, it must be in all that you perceive to be missing from your life. In some inexplicable way, you're already connected to all that you'd like to attract into your life by the presence of this universal, all-powerful spirit called God. You may have read about some of the great saints in India. They seem to possess the magical powers of instant manifestation. Their presence appears to heal the sick, and they communicate a sense of divine bliss and peace to all those that they encounter. One saint was asked by a reporter from the West, "Are you God?" The saint responded without hesitation, "Yes, I am," to which everyone in attendance seemed stunned. Then after a brief pause, he continued, "And so are you. The only difference between you and I," he said, "is that I know it, and you doubt it. You are a divine creation of God. You can never be separate from that which created you. If you can think of God as the ocean and yourself as a container, You may find it helpful in moments of doubt, or when you feel lost or alone, to remember that you are a container of God. When you dip your glass into the ocean, what you have is a glass of God. It's not as big or as strong, but it's still God. As long as you refuse to believe otherwise, you won't feel separate from God. Think of a drop of water from the ocean of abundance that's separated from its source. Separated from its source, that droplet of water will ultimately evaporate and return to its source. The point is that while it's in its liquid form, disconnected from its source, it loses the power of its source. This is the essence of the secret of always treasuring your divinity. While you're separated in your mind from your source, you lose your divine power, the power of your source. Just like the drop of water, you too will change form and ultimately return to your source. As long as you feel disconnected from God, you lose the power of your source, which is the unlimited power to create, to be miraculous, and to experience the joy of being alive. The drop of water disconnected from its divine source symbolizes your ego. What is your ego? Your ego is nothing more than an idea that you carry around with you everywhere you go. This idea tells you that you are the sum total of what you have, or what you do, and who you are. Ego insists that you are a separate being, that your personality and your body are your essence, and that you are in competition with every other ego to get your share of the pie, which is limited and finite. Therefore, ego asserts you must be wary of others who also want all that they feel they're entitled to. Consequently, ego leads you to believe that there are enemies to be wary of at all times. Since you're separate from them, you must disdain cooperating with them for fear of being cheated. The result is that you have to distrust everyone. Your ego also tells you that you're separate from everything that's missing in your life, and so you must spend a great deal of energy chasing after what's missing. Moreover, because who you are, according to ego, is your body and your personality, you're separate from God. God is outside of you, a force to fear, just like all of those external forces attempting to control you. So you beg this external force to provide you with special powers to overcome all of those other egos who are trying so hard to snare what is rightfully yours. Your ego keeps you in a constant state of fear, worry, anxiety, and stress. It implores you to be better than everyone around you. It beseeches you to push harder and to get God on your side. In short, it maintains your separate status from God and allows you to be terrified of your own divinity. You are a piece of God. You are a divine creation, a being of light who showed up here as a human being in the exact moment you were supposed to. Your body will depart at precisely the right moment as well. But you're not that body you behold, nor are you its personality or any of its possessions and accomplishments. You are the beloved, a miracle, a part of the eternal perfection, a piece of the divine intelligence that supports everything and everyone on this planet. In a world in which this divine intelligence creates everything, there can be no accidents. Every time you experience fear, self-rejection, anxiety, guilt, or hate, you're denying your divinity and succumbing to the influences of that insidious ego mind that has convinced you of your disconnection to God. Author U.S. Anderson wrote an inspiring book many years ago called 3 Magic Words. Mr. Anderson writes about the ability to become a miracle worker and to live up to the ideal of the promise made by Jesus Christ. Even the least among you can do all that I have done, and even greater things. The author doesn't reveal what the 3 magic words are until the end of the book, when the reader discovers that the words are, "You are God." Not God in the sense of above all others and better than everyone else, but in the sense of being eternally connected to your source, the ever-present power of love that never abandons you and never runs dry. You can rely on this source if you remind yourself that it includes you at all times.
Resist not evil means giving up fighting your problems. I want to stress again the significance of removing force from your life as a way of achieving a problem-free life. When you become a fighter against anything, you join forces with that which created the problem in the first place. When Mother Teresa was asked during the Vietnam War, "Will you join our march against this war?" she replied, "No, I won't. But if you have a march for peace, I'll be there." When we put our collective energy on what we are for, bringing kindness and love to bear on our differences of opinions, the need to resist ends. It is only through a change in consciousness that our world will be transformed. This is true of your life and all of your problems as well. Hold no one or no thing in judgment. In the material world, we often find ourselves in conflict because of our opinions about right and wrong. You cannot bring spiritual harmony into problem resolution as long as you accept the idea that one side is right and the other is wrong. Letting go of judgments and simply finding a way of bringing non-judgmental harmony to a problem eliminates the ego's need to make someone wrong, which inevitably exacerbates the problem. One of the most compelling ideas I have personally learned regarding judgment is this. When you judge another person, you do not define them. You merely define yourself as someone who needs to judge. Just because you make an assertion that someone is stupid or cheap or arrogant or flighty or promiscuous does not define that person. It only says something in you is having a conflict with something outside of you. If judgment continues without seeking the source of the conflict within you, problems will continue unabated. Your own level of spiritual energy is immediately raised when you are able to resist that temptation to judge others as wrong and yourself as right. True nobility is not about being better than anyone else. It is about being better than you used to be. Knowing that you have just as much to teach me as I to teach you affirms for me that I am not better than any person out there on this planet. Yet at the same time, I know that I am better than I used to be. Much better. I am no longer dominated by my ego's need to be right, to accomplish and triumph. I now ask how may I serve before wondering what's in it for me. I teach meditation rather than medication, and I'm a better father, husband, and son than I once was. You must slow down to speed up your spiritual energy. Ironically, fast-paced, frantic activity is a very low, slow form of energy. When your mind and your body are in a constant state of worry and anxiety, meeting deadlines and scurrying to keep the next appointment, remember that in the world of physical form, the actual energy pattern is extremely slow. Hence the irony when you slow yourself down and emanate peaceful, tranquil thoughts, you actually send the anxiety and stress out of your life. Similarly, when you meditate, you bring God's silent love into your present moments. By slowing your mind and freeing it from the endless chatter of thoughts competing against other thoughts, you allow the fastest vibrations of spirit to enter. I have used a technique in traffic to slow my mind down and consequently allow the peace of God's fast vibrations to be present within me. When I am stopped at a red light, I usually choose to use this minute to still and stop my mind as well. I find that I can simply close my eyes, meditate for the prescribed stoppage time, and experience the peace of that moment. I have also discovered that there is almost always someone behind me who will give me a considerate wake-up honk to remind me that my meditation time is up. Here is one of the most famous prayers of all time. It's the prayer of St. Francis of Assisi, upon which the remainder of this program is based. Lord, make me an instrument of thy peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. Where there is sadness, joy. O divine Master, grant that I may not so much seek to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love. For it is in giving that we receive, it is in pardoning that we are pardoned, it is in dying to self that we are born to eternal life. St. Francis of Assisi.